right, good afternoon and welcome to today's candidate forum for Deschutes County Commission, sponsored by the Central Oregon Association of Realtors and KTVZ News Channel 21. I'm Tyler Neese, COAR's Government Affairs Director. I know there's a little different format this year, so thank you for joining us online via the live stream. Just a few housekeeping notes before I introduce our moderator and we hear from the candidates. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, 2 minutes to respond to questions from the moderator, and 1 minute for rebuttal. We have a timer up here that the candidates and moderator can see to help keep us on track. We will still allow time for questions with the candidates in this forum, so if you have a question you'd like to ask, please type it into the comments on the Facebook live stream and we'll get to those questions at the end. We'll also ask candidates to limit their responses to 2 minutes during the audience Q&A portion as well. All right, that's more than enough housekeeping. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Lee Anderson. Lee Anderson is probably a familiar face for most of you. Have you seen him nightly on KTVZ News Channel 21, where he's a news anchor? Lee has been with KTVZ since 1996, where he has been an anchor, producer, reporter, and news director. Lee is a graduate of Indiana State University, and we're excited to have him as our moderator today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Lee. Thank you, Lee.
All right, thank you, Tyler, and good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, candidates. Thanks for joining us today in this next in the series of the Central Oregon Association of Realtors Candidate Forums. Today, we are talking about the Deschutes County Commission, and we have two people here in the front, Commissioner Phil Henderson on my far right, and Phil Chang, his challenger, right here next to me. A matter of disclosure, full disclosure here, I have nothing to do with the Central Oregon Association of Realtors. I've just been asked, honored and asked to be the moderator of these forums. And also, we need to let people know that the Central Oregon Association of Realtors PAC has supported Phil Henderson. So we want to get that out there. All right. We did a coin toss to determine who goes first today, and Commissioner Phil Henderson won. He is elected to go first. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Phil Henderson, you have 2 minutes to tell us who you are and why you're running for Deschutes County Commissioner.
Well, thank you, Lee. I appreciate your introduction and the opportunity to have you be our moderator today. That's great. I want to thank Tyler and all the staff and members of Central Oregon Association of Realtors for holding this debate. This is the first time we've actually been able to appear in person, which is kind of unusual in election years. We usually have a chance to intermingle and have live debate. So this is great to do this. I also want to thank members of the Central Oregon Association of Realtors. I know realtors have been very inventive over the last 6 to 9 months with the way they do their work and sales activities to meet the demands of a COVID virus. And I know also a lot of them have been great contributors to the COVID challenges and some of the fire challenges from our evacuees. We've covered a lot in our prior 2 debates, and I really thought it was important today. We're going to get to those in the questions and answers, I believe, but I think it's really important that I focus on what I think is the most significant single issue going forward over the next 4 years in Deschutes County, and that's the housing and affordability crisis that we've been living in and is just simply getting worse. I'm uniquely qualified, I believe, with regard to this issue because of my experience as a home builder. I've been a general contractor myself. I've run a large construction company and started building houses actually when I was first out of college, so I have a lot of experience with that. I think that unless we do things soon in communities and of Deschutes County, and probably in lots of regions in the state, we're never going to really solve these problems. And when I talk about these problems, what I'm talking about is the fact, not the people that are able to come here from out of the area, independent of our economy, with enough money to buy an expensive house. I'm talking about our own children when they grow up. Where can they live if they get their first job? Where can the people that serve us in the restaurants or gas stations, where do some of our public employees that are just starting out, where do they live? I think this is a huge crisis, and we need to do things that are different than what we've been doing over the last 50 years in Oregon, because that's how old our land use system is. This is also an area that my opponent and I have extremely different approaches to the problems with housing And I think we will find, as you hear from me, some of mine are some of the best solutions and the most widespread and the most thought out. So again, thank you, and I hope you'll support me after today's debate.
All right, Phil Chang, 2 minutes. Tell us about yourself and why you're running for Deschutes County Commissioner.
I'm just going to jump right into the substance. Thank you to CORE and to Lee for this opportunity to focus in on land use, growth, housing, transportation, and infrastructure today. One of the most beautiful things about Deschutes County right now is that it offers this incredible range of living opportunities. There are opportunities to live on and work on a commercial farm, to live in a small woodlot, to live in a single-family home neighborhood, or to live in a townhouse or a cottage, or there's even some few opportunities to live in pockets of urban living in our community. But projections show that tens of thousands of people are moving here this decade, and we will need to build thousands of new homes to accommodate that growth. Phil Henderson's vision is to meet that demand by building new rural subdivisions all over the county. But this degrades that wonderful range of lifestyles that we currently offer. You can't put those new rural subdivisions in areas that, you can put those new rural subdivisions in areas where it's not prime forest land or it's not prime crop growing land. But the woodlot owner or the farmer that lives next to those areas doesn't want a new subdivision for a neighbor. And the people who live in our cities and towns don't want thousands of additional rural residents flooding onto their streets during rush hour in the morning and in the afternoon. And Phil Henderson's vision of rural sprawl doesn't do anything to improve housing affordability either. Land is expensive, and if we use a 2-acre lot or a 5-acre piece of land for just one single-family home, you can't possibly sell that home for a price within the reach of a young worker. The right place to convert rural lands to development is on the edges of existing population centers.
All right, thank you, Phil. If you will, just keep an eye on the clock there. Gentlemen, I'll just tell you right now, if you start to go over, I will stop you. I will just,
Great.
okay, I will
Thanks.
interrupt you. No
We
offense.
have a clock. We have a clock.
Yeah,
No offense,
it
okay.
seemed to start a little late for Phil's.
It did, and it started a
early
little late
comments.
for you as well.
Okay.
Okay. I think it takes just a couple of seconds for our man back there to get the clock started, but I was watching, and both of you actually had about 2:10, so. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, let's get into the questions now. And Phil Henderson, once again, you go first. Question number 1, what is the biggest challenge Deschutes County faces, and if elected, how will you address it?
So nice segue from where we started, from my point of view, and that's what I called the housing and affordability problem that we're facing right now. First, I want to just point out that I really would appreciate if my opponent spoke for what he wants instead of misquoting what I've said and trying to allege that I'm in support of things I'm not in support of. I like the realness of Deschutes County. I've never proposed subdivisions, thousands of houses in the rural parts of Deschutes County. That may be a talking point from some group that he's affiliated with, but that's not what I think. My response to the issues of affordability for housing is countywide, though. And by that I mean that there's different communities in the county. We're not just Bend, we're also Lapine, Sisters, and Redmond. And I think all of those areas have various strategies for developing more housing. Both Lapine and Redmond have a substantial amount of housing for the foreseeable future, or land for foreseeable future. And we've been able, as county commissioners, to donate land to both the Habitat for Humanity and Housing Works in Lapine, and are doing some other strategies there that can help there. In Redmond, we've been the leaders, and I spoke in the legislature and advocated for a pilot program there to help with being able to get a kind of outside the UGB requirements to build affordable homes, and that's another pilot solution. In Bend specifically, the role of the county is really in preparing the boundaries around Deschutes, around Bend, so that when there is an additional urban growth boundary expansion, we'll be ready for it. So those are some of the solutions I have. I have some more. Hopefully I'll get to.
All right, thank you very much, Phil. Phil Chang, you've got 2 minutes, same question. What is the biggest challenge Deschutes County faces, and if elected, how will you address it?
Well, prior to COVID, I believe that housing availability and affordability was the largest challenge that our community was facing. So I'll focus on that, and maybe we'll get to talk about COVID later. I do want to first say that whenever I attribute an idea or a quote to Phil Henderson, it is all from public record, things that I've seen him say or seen him vote for during public meetings. So yes, housing affordability is one of our biggest problems in Central Oregon and in Deschutes County. And we need to do things to both make housing more available and to make it more affordable. And we can't stop at availability and think that we've solved the affordability problem. So in terms of availability, two of the things that are within the county's control to do are three things. Keep working on making rural ADUs legislatively approved or authorized. Two, work with our cities, in particular, on expanding urban growth boundaries, being a good partner in that process. And also, when we think about places like the city of Bend, we can also work on establishing urban area reserves. The third thing, in terms of making land available for housing, is that the county can use some of the substantial land assets that it has to support rural, to support support affordable housing projects within city limits. Now, in terms of affordability, what we really need to do is learn to use land more efficiently. You cannot take a $100,000 lot, put a single-family home on it, and make it affordable. You can slice that lot up into pieces and put more units.
All
of
right,
housing
thank
on
you,
the same
Phil.
lot.
Time's up. Ready for question number 2 to Phil?
I'd like
You want-
to do a rebuttal
okay.
on this. So just to clarify, if we're going to go with quotes, I've actually got the quotes of Mr. Chang, and for some reason he's had 2 opportunities to speak about housing and hasn't mentioned the things he said in prior debates. One is that his view is that all growth should be in and up, meaning we should densify our cities. He said it in 2 or 3 different occasions. He hasn't said it here today. He's kind of went around the edges of that, but he said that, and I don't think that's the pattern that most people live in Deschutes County come here for, where they want to live in what he refers to as a more urban environment. Most people come here for some room. He's also quoted last week in a debate saying a triplex on every block or a couple of ADUs on every block allows to fit thousands more people. Well, I think triplexes and ADUs both have a role in our cities to the extent that the cities want them, but I don't think we want them on every block, and I think lots of neighborhoods don't. Maybe that's not the correct way to do it all. So the other thing he mentioned was the issue of ADUs. That's something that I'm glad he's come to support. It wasn't clear he had supported it previously, but this is the idea that if you have rural housing and you maybe want to build a smaller residence that you could put maybe a family member or you could rent out, would be allowed. And we're pressing that
All
for
right,
the county.
thank you, Phil. Phil, yeah, you get your minute.
respond to
Now,
that.
that clock did not start on time, so we'll give you a few extra seconds there.
Phil Henderson is very interested in talking about preferences, people's preferences for housing options here. And he says that people don't want to live in compact communities. I would say that people's very first preference is being able to find a home that they can afford to live in. And there are thousands of young people in our community who are struggling to find a place that they can afford to live. I remember one young couple that I met at the beginning of the campaign on the east side of Bend who were living in a duplex because that was what they could afford. And that goes to my initial point, which is that we need to use land efficiently in order to bring down the cost of each unit of housing. And that includes things like duplexes and triplexes and cottages and some apartment buildings.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Question number 2, Phil Henderson begins. The county is currently discussing a potential program to reevaluate agricultural lands and define non-prime resource lands. Do you support reexamining land designation for farming that may not actually be viable for crops to determine if it could be used for other purposes? And what uses do you feel are appropriate?
Yeah. Thank you, Lee. That's a great question, and it's something that was initiated by discussions we've had at the county commission level. And there's a couple different parts of this. One is as a real small part of it is that we have 6 subdivisions we've identified in the county. And when I call them subdivisions, they were divided with lots back in the 70s and 80s before we had our Oregon land use system. And most of them have roughly 50% or more of the lots have already been put houses on. But there still remain zoned as either farm or forest. And we think that's impractical because they're really a legacy home subdivision. And so that's something we've supported changing the zoning on. But you immediately, when you try to do something that simple and that commonsensical in Oregon, which I've lived my whole entire life and been with this land use system for the 50 years it's existed, you run up against 1,000 Friends of Oregon, you run up against the Land Conservation Development Commission in Salem, and Central Oregon Land Watch opposes those things because they think it's going to start a trend. Well, it doesn't. It's just 6 areas. The second part, though, is that unlike the Willamette Valley, much of our flat land that has sagebrush or juniper on it, now I'm not talking about up in the forest, but the rest of the county that is owned by the federal government, doesn't have farm or forest potential, and yet a lot of it's zoned as that. And so we've asked, now what you have to do if you own a property there, you have to prove it's non-farmable with a very expensive process to be able to do anything with that land. We're open to rezoning that into something that's more of a middle ground. I'm a big supporter of farming. My family's been farming in Oregon for 150 years. I like forests and I really like wildlife and I want to preserve those, but we do need to look at these lots.
All right, thank you, Phil. Same question to you, Phil. The county is currently discussing a potential program to reevaluate agricultural lands and define non-prime resource lands. Do you support reexamining land designated for farming that may not actually be viable for crops to determine if it could be used for other purposes, and what uses do you feel are appropriate?
These lands that are zoned EFU or F1 may not be able to grow crops or grow timber very fast. But there still may be other reasons that we don't want to put them under subdivisions. They may have habitat or habitat corridor value. It may be a bad idea to be building in certain areas because you're putting people in the pathway of wildfire. Also, developing areas, developing rural subdivisions has traffic impacts in our existing communities. But I do agree that the 6 legacy rural residential areas are places that it was clear someone intended for those to be residential areas, and that we should follow whatever the appropriate processes are to get those areas, to allow those people the property rights to build homes there. That is one of the only, that is one of two instances where I think we should be working on moving these lands that are not farm or forest lands, productive farm or forest lands, into residential zoning. And the other place where I think we should be doing that is at the edges of incorporated cities to facilitate urban growth boundary expansions. And again, we need to do that using appropriate procedures. The big problem with the 6 legacy rural residential areas was that when the county pursued that in the first place, they overreached. They put out a policy that was much more sweeping and would affect a much bigger area than that. And then they shouldn't be surprised when people get upset or their guards up about that, and then fight even down to the 6 legacy rural residential areas.
All right, thank you, Phil. Question number 3.
I'd like to do a rebuttal on that.
Go ahead.
So really, I think in terms of land use, we've identified the crux of the issue, which is that,
Hold on just a second, Phil. We're going to get the clocks set up here. It takes a few seconds to change
oh, okay.
change our computer.
Well, I'm jumping in because I
Yeah, I know. I understand that.
don't want to waste this time. So is what I said already recorded, or?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay,
It's out
good.
there for everybody.
All right. Thank you. So the crux of the difference between the two of us on land use. I think that in Oregon, in many of our communities, particularly not in the Willamette Valley, but in eastern Oregon and other places, we've basically self-imposed an affordability by the fact that we don't allow anything other than what Mr. Chang was talking about, which is just growing at the boundaries of existing cities. Deschutes County presently is not a place where we have just cities and then rural land. We have literally thousands of Deschutes County residents that live in rural properties, many in subdivisions that would be not allowed today, but are very practical places and very cost-effective places for many Deschutes residents. So I think the other problem with just waiting for the UGB boundaries, we passed a UGB boundary 4 years ago in Bend. I don't believe a single house has been built inside that addition in 4 years.
All
So
right,
it doesn't
thank you,
get the
Phil.
job done.
Would you like to have a minute, Phil?
Yes.
All right, let's just wait just a second. We'll give you a few extra seconds, too. How's that?
Great. Ready?
Go ahead.
So as Commissioner Henderson said, we do have thousands of people who live in existing rural residences right now. And based on the housing or the vacant lands analysis that was just completed as part of the housing study for the county, there are over 5,000 additional vacant lots that are available in unincorporated communities, in destination resorts, existing destination resorts. If you'll believe it or not, there's still some available lots in places like Sun River. And in multiple use agriculture and rural residential 10 and places like that. So we have a lot of existing opportunities where people are living, and we have a lot more vacant areas that can be built in. And so that raises the question, why do we need to pursue an extensive expansion of non-prime resource land rezoning to add even more? I'll also mention that within that 5,000, I don't think Thornburg is included in that, and I don't think the current non-prime
Okay,
proposal
thank you,
is
Phil.
included.
All right, third question. Phil Henderson. Currently, state law prohibits accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, in the rural county, but there have been efforts in the legislature to pass policy to allow them. Would you support ADUs in the rural county?
Yes, absolutely, for our county. And I'll say that we as commissioners, working with our community development department, have been a leader in Salem to try to get that legislation passed. We thought we might have gotten it this year in the last session, not the ones after COVID, but before that. But other things kind of take priority, and it didn't. As I mentioned in my opening, the accessory dwelling units in rural properties, particularly what we've talked about is limiting it to multiple use agriculture and rural, or RR10, rural 10, residential 10, that those would give an additional living opportunity on a parcel that's already developed that would be, and a good example is family members, either kids or maybe parents, brothers, sisters, whatever, and it could be a rental property. And I think there's a lot of support in our county for that. Now, some counties don't have that same support, and I know, and that's going to be an issue that they wouldn't want to necessarily adopt it in their commission. So we've proposed legislation in Salem that it be an option of each county, so there'd be some local control on that. And we're supportive of that. We're kind of gearing up that in the next legislature, we'll be able to testify about that in support of it. But a lot of these properties are close enough to town that they could be a practical housing unit. They're limited on size. They have to be close to the other homes. So that makes it a good solution for a lot of people and a good opportunity.
All right. Phil Chang, same question. Currently, state law prohibits accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, in the rural county, but there have been efforts in the legislature to pass policy to allow them. Would you support ADUs in the rural county?
I have stated from the beginning that I am in favor of rural ADUs in Deschutes County. And I believe that the county should continue to support legislative efforts to authorize rural ADUs. I have heard from many Deschutes County residents who have an elderly family member or a young adult family member who wants to come live with them and who could benefit from having a separate residence. I've also talked to farmers who, kind of local fruit and vegetable and meat producers who are doing really labor-intensive agriculture, who have said, I need to be able to offer to a worker something like housing to be able to, to get them to come and work for me at the wages that I can offer. So rural ADUs really do have their place. And in terms of putting additional people out on the rural landscape, it is the better place to put people than in a new subdivision, because those people probably, or there's a good opportunity for those people to, share transportation and access to shopping and things like that with the person in the main residence. So the traffic impacts would be less. There's less fragmentation of the landscape because the rural ADU would be built close to an existing structure as opposed to, putting new homes in the middle of nowhere. So there are a lot of things to recommend rural ADUs as a way to add housing in the rural portions of Deschutes County. And there are many units out there already, and we need to allow them to come out of the shadows and make their places safe. Thanks.
All right, we're ready for question number 4 then. Phil Henderson, as the county continues to grow and land use decisions are increasingly appealed, how can the county balance its responsibility to protect and manage natural resources with development and the needs of a growing community?
Well, appreciate the question. So there's multiple goals for the Oregon's land use system, and natural resources, wildlife are goals in there with farm, forest, housing, et cetera. So it's important to balance it first, to have that goal. I think that we're lucky to be in an area of Oregon, and I guess an area of the country that actually does have some growth, because I think that does give people opportunity, economic opportunity, and which gives them a chance to, I think, have a better life. So I'm in favor of that. I think balancing it's a matter of, as a county commissioner, doing many of the things I've done for 4 years and will continue to do, which is being engaged in the Deschutes Basin Water Collaborative, the Deschutes Forest Collaborative, looking at issues and trade-offs in those settings to be aware of all those issues, et cetera, and doing it. The other part with regard to land use matters being appealed, that's again one of the parts of our land use system that makes part of what we do ineffective no matter what we do it, because all we can do is interpret the laws as well as we know, and then the state has the ability to override those, which they do if they want to. So I think the important thing in terms of doing meeting these goals is to have a good inventory of our lands. Only 20% of Deschutes County is actually kind of under our land use planning, in the sense that 80% is owned by the federal government. But I think it's a matter of balance, additional studies. We're seeing more and more projects where wildlife biologists and people like that are involved in helping make decisions.
All right, very good. Same question to you, Phil Chang. As the county continues to grow and land use decisions are increasingly appealed, how can the county balance its responsibility to protect and manage natural resources with development and the needs of a growing community?
Thanks for the question. So many people live here in Deschutes County because it is a remarkable place to live with incredible natural resource values. And to kind of harken back to the last two responses I've given, it really matters what we build and where we build it, what kind of impacts we're going to have on natural resources, and how they need to be mitigated. What we build and where we build also has huge implications for transportation and for affordability. But to go to natural resources, we need to focus development in the right places, and that's why I keep talking about not building rural subdivisions out in the middle of nowhere, but instead concentrating growth on the edges of existing cities, and talking about how many rural parcels we already have available for development before we start thinking about how many more we need. Now, I have a long track record of experience and success in collaboration around natural resource issues. The Deschutes Collaborative Forest Project that Commissioner Henderson mentioned, I was one of the founders of that group and wrote the initial proposal. I was one of three authors who wrote the initial proposal that secured $10.1 million to restore forests on the edges of Sisters Bend and Sun River. So I have a lot of experience working with everyone to balance economic development and natural resource protection, or actually even in this case, restoration and making putting our natural resources in an even better condition, like our forests or our river. So I have the experience to bring people together and hash through issues, so hopefully we don't even have appeals in the first place.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Would you like a minute? Anybody on a minute there? You want a minute for
I'm
that?
good, thank you.
All right, good. Okay. Well, we went through that very quickly. I think we're going to have some time for some good questions. We've been asking questions. If you have a question you'd like to ask these candidates, you can get on our Facebook Live and put in the comments section. So we're going to take some questions, if that's all right with you, gentlemen, from the audience participating with us today. And as soon as we get those up there, okay, there we go. Question number one. All right, and this, again, since you won the coin flip, what we've done in the past, Commissioner Henderson, is we've said, would you like to swap now for the Q&A? But it's completely up to you because you won the coin flip.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
We can swap. Let's do it.
Okay,
That's
Phil,
fair.
ready to take first question then?
Yes.
Let me read it to you now. How should the county partner with the Ben Lapine School District to provide more mental health resources to students? And again, 2 minutes.
The county missed a really important opportunity to partner with the Ben Lapine School District to provide more mental health resources for students just a few months ago at the end of May. The Ben Lapine School District came to the County Budget Committee, which consists of the 3 commissioners plus a couple of appointed members, and said to them, we love your behavioral health specialists. They help us in so many ways to address the mental health needs of our kids and make our schools a better place for them. We would love to have one behavioral health specialist each embedded in our high schools, and we will pay half the cost of that, and that partnership will help us address escalating youth suicide rates. We have some of the highest youth suicide rates in the state in Deschutes County. They said this will help us address youth substance abuse, and this will help us improve the social climate of our schools. Now, the Budget Committee did not really take this proposal seriously and did not give it the attention that it deserved. The time slot that the item was scheduled for on the Budget Committee's schedule, on a Tuesday, the Budget Committee completely blew the schedule so that the people from the school district who could have represented this issue didn't get a chance to speak to them. And then the real substantive discussion of the issue was deferred till an undetermined time on Friday. So people needed to be available throughout the entire day if they wanted to be able to answer questions if the Budget Committee asked them any. So they did not take this proposal seriously. They did not give it serious attention, and then they outright dismissed it. One member of the Budget Committee moved for it to be voted on. The others wouldn't even consider it.
Right on time. Thank you, Phil. Commissioner Henderson, same question to you now. How should the county partner with the Ben LaPine School District to provide more mental health resources to students?
Thank you. My opponent here, Mr. Chang, talks about this issue as if he was actually in the room when it all went down. But the fact is he wasn't. This was our budget meeting. He didn't actually attend any of the budget meetings. The first time in the last two election cycles that candidates for commissioner didn't attend the budget meetings, which is really one of the most important weeks of a county schedule. And he wasn't there, so he's telling you about the history of this, which is kind of frustrating to somebody that's been involved in mental health now and the budgets in depth for 4 years as a county commissioner. The fact is that there may be a role for Deschutes County providing more mental health resources to the school districts. What we don't know and have never really heard from the school district and the board of directors is what it is they're really trying to accomplish. Already, we have school health nurses in our schools, which are connected with Deschutes County. We also have offered, in the recent years, counselors for substance abuse problems. There also, the school district has its own counselors. So this proposal is one that we tabled at the last budget session in this past June for a number of reasons. One of those was that we didn't have a presentation from anyone. All this backstory, I must know, I know several of the school board, the Democratic Liberal school board members have supported Mr. Chang. Maybe he gets his information from them. I've never heard that they were prepared to come and testify to us. So I heard more from him today about what their intent was than I heard from the school board members. So that's really just, again, a misnomer by someone who's uninformed. We do think it could be an important role, but we do want to know the long-term costs of this, because this was $170,000 the first year, then $220, and then $250. These
All right, thanks,
programs
Phil.
grow. We got to do
That's
something
it.
about
That's
it.
all the time we have for that question.
I'd like to rebut that.
Okay. Let's wait just a second. We'll put the 1 minute up there.
I know what happened at that budget committee meeting because I sat through the entire week of budget committee hearings. 40 hours, well over 40 hours, Monday through Friday, and I wasn't there in person because of COVID. But I was diligently sitting there on Zoom, watching the proceedings, and that's why I know that there was a school district representative as well as representatives from the County Behavioral Health Department who were ready to present an in-depth proposal to the Budget Committee during that time period, during their allotted time period, and that they were ignored during that time period. I also know about this proposal because I read the packet item that was in the Budget Committee's packet, which apparently Commissioner Henderson did not.
So, yeah, I'll
Phil, you get a
comment.
minute?
We literally never ignore anyone in our budget meetings. They're intense meetings for an entire week. If you were there online, I guess that's possible. I have no idea. But you weren't in the room, which you could have been. And we never saw a representative from the school district that I'm aware of. But the point was that this was brought up at the end of the process, and we decided to wait and see. And what we literally said was, this is something we may want to consider going forward, but there was uncertainty with what we could do from then. So we're planning to bring it up in another session. Of course, they're not in school now anyway, so it wouldn't make a difference right now.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Do we have another question back there, Tyler? We do have another question. And we thank you for sending in your questions. If you do have a question, we've got a little time, so just send them in the comment section on the Facebook Live Central Oregon Association Realtors page. Here's the question. Phil Chang, you begin. Do you believe the county's contribution to regional transit is sufficient, and why?
The county contributes virtually nothing to regional transit. In recent years, the state has created the Surface Transportation Improvement, STIF, that is payroll tax money that is directed to transit providers through counties. But this is not a program that the county created, nor is it a program that the county can take any credit for in terms of spending money on regional transit. My understanding is that the county's contribution to our regional transit system, Cascades East Transit, has essentially been limited to buying a couple of employees' bus passes in the last few years. And for a system that serves so many residents of Deschutes County, people who live in our small incorporated cities like Sisters or La Pine, people who would like to use the bus, who live in places like Tumalo or Sun River or Terrebonne, that is, in my opinion, shameful, because these are people who need to get to work, they need to get to medical appointments, and the bus is one of the best ways of getting where you need to go if you are a person on a limited income or live in in a marginal status. So now that there is this state payroll tax program, I'm not sure whether it's the right time for the county to start putting general fund investment into the transit system, but the fact that we haven't for several years, and we haven't been making those connections for the residents of Deschutes County is disappointing.
All right. Phil Henderson, same question. Do you believe the county's contribution to the regional transit is sufficient, and why?
Yeah, Lee, I do think our contribution has been sufficient, and the reason is it was never set up that the county had called for or promised a regional transit system. Some counties do have regional transit systems, like Lane County, and then they go countywide. The one that was created here was primarily in the city of Bend and then expanded. And frankly, it didn't need county taxpayers to pay additional money. I live on the other side of town from Mr. Chang. I live on the east side, so on the way home, I go by the bus barn nearly every day, and you can see how many buses they literally have sitting there day in and day out. And I don't think there's any shortage of funds with our regional transit. What we're finding now, in fact, is that there's less and less riders, particularly because of COVID-19, that people aren't using it. So what our biggest contribution really isn't money and doesn't need to be, but has been the oversight that the county commissioners have been involved with. And since I've been there, those have been important in the sense that we have the funding coming from the state of Oregon from the payroll tax, which the legislature in 2017 passed, has become the source of roughly $7 million in 3 years, and we're helpful in guiding that money. So the thing we bring to it really the most is setting up an advisory committee and helping to determine where to spend that. And we are the ones that promoted things like a regular route between La Pine and Sun River. We've suggested that in the winter, if we're going to have a bus system, we need snow equipment to clear off the bus stops, et cetera. And third, we've done a lot to make smaller buses because they're not being used very much. But I don't feel a need or a shame that we haven't spent more.
All right, thank you very much. 1 minute, Phil Chang, if you want to just wait just a second, we can put the timer up. A couple of hoops we have to jump through here technically. And there we go. Go ahead, Phil.
Phil Henderson is concerned that not many people are using the bus. I know from tracking the data that last year they provided over 500,000 rides in our region. So someone is using the bus. People for whom having a car is either cost prohibitive or challenging to operate need that bus to get to education, to get to their medical appointments, to get to work. Phil Henderson mentioned the Lapine to Sun River connection, which very excitingly was going to start this year, allowing employees to get from Lapine to Sun River. The problem is that, well, we had COVID, so a lot of the jobs that would have been created at Sun River, aren't really happening. But also, the problem is that with the state money, that service was scheduled to just happen during the summer and was going to be cut off in the fall.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to make a comment on that. I don't want it to be taken in any means that I don't support having the bus system if people are using it, and I'm aware that people have used it. But what I understand is that over the last several months, it's really the usage has gone down significantly because of the fear. So that's an issue with whether we should be growing right now. I do also support other routes, and in my role as a county commissioner, was involved in helping plan that for COIC and Cascades East Transit. So I do want to say that.
All right, thank you very much, Phil. Do we have another question? We do have another question. Good. We're just rolling right along here, gentlemen. All right, once again, Phil Chang. The county has cut property taxes on residents twice in recent years. Do you support retaining those cuts or increasing taxes to fund more county programs?
The property tax rate reductions that are being described here were implemented in, I want to say 2018, 2019, the 2 years before this one. And each one of those was about 3 cents per thousand. And what 3 cents per thousand adds up to for your average Deschutes County homeowner is maybe $7, $8, $9 a year. So it's not a dramatic savings for Deschutes County residents. It's also not a dramatic. It's not the biggest impact on the county revenue either. So I would not advocate to reverse those rate reductions, but I would argue that we shouldn't necessarily do more. There was a lot of concern this year with COVID about county revenue declines. Those have not been as bad as anticipated, but we still have had some huge costs that were not anticipated when people were budgeting the year before, like health staff to do contact tracing and environmental health inspections and technical assistance for restaurants and things like that. So I wouldn't reverse those cuts, but I don't think we need more. And I do think that our county, because our property tax base continues to grow, more people are moving here, housing values are going up, that we will continue to see growth in county revenues from growth of our property tax base, and we can use that to meet the growing service needs of our community.
All right, very good. Phil Henderson, the county has cut property taxes on residents twice in recent years. Do you support retaining those cuts or increasing taxes to fund more county programs?
Yeah, thank you, Lee. Well, this is a really important issue that, to me personally, I definitely support retaining those cuts. When I ran for office, this was one of the two issues, the other being housing, that I thought was really important, was that the property taxes are different than income taxes. To pay more income taxes, you have to make more. Property taxes just automatically go up 3% a year on your property, regardless of whether you make more or not. And as long as your assessed value is lower than your market value. Well, in an inflated environment of market values, this just goes up. And so in 10 years, you're paying 30% more than you were 10 years ago. In 20 years on the same house, you'll be paying more than 60% more. So I felt that we needed to do some correction of that. And so by rolling it back 6 cents, and I was the leader of that within the commission in 2017 budget session in 18, we were able to roll it back essentially a year and a half of automatic increases. So that was good. I was actually in favor of a third cut this year, and with the support of another commissioner, we could do that. What this contributes to the economy is about $1.5 million every year. It stays in private people's hands for their own use rather than being spent on the government. It also is one of the ways that you can actually get at the issue of how much are we spending at government. It's not a dramatic amount, but the act of doing it is dramatic. You won't find another government body or government agency in Oregon or in Central Oregon that's done this. Usually they just take more and more money and they're fine with it. So we're saying, no, let's keep a cap on it. Let's roll it back when we can, and we can because our general fund continues to grow. So I'm supportive of what we've done and doing more. And that's a big distinction between the two of us.
Yeah, I'd like to.
You want to take a minute?
Sure.
All right. There you go.
Again, I'm not proposing that we roll back those property tax rate reductions, but I would not be in favor of us doing additional. A growing community needs growing services. We've already talked about today the example of the behavioral health partnership with the Bend LaPine School District, which would have only cost us $170,000 per year from the county general fund. And to be able to potentially prevent one youth suicide in our community, that's worth a lot. Another example of a community proposal that we haven't been able to support because people say that we don't have enough general fund to do that too, is to provide capital construction dollars for the proposed Veterans Village in Deschutes County. So this would be transitional housing for homeless veterans to get them back on their feet and
Okay,
back to work.
thank you, Phil.
Yeah, I'd like to comment. Well, I appreciate Phil bringing up the issue of the Veterans Village. I didn't know if we'd have a chance to talk about that, but that's something I've worked in very closely with Bend Heroes and the Central Oregon Veterans Outreach. We're in making a project in our Deschutes County Safety Campus, transitional housing. We have already contributed dollars from the CARES Act, and I'm sure we're going to contribute more once that gets underway. So I don't think we have a shortage. I think the myth is, and I've heard this now repeatedly from Mr. Chang, is that, we aren't spending enough on these issues. We're spending every year more and more money on mental health, for instance. Our mental health budget is over $33 million a year. We started a new stabilization. That's a place for children to go as well as adults. We've added wraparound services for children with mental or behavioral health problems that need help. So we're doing those things.
All right, thank you, Phil. Do you have another question, Tyler? We do have another question. Excellent. And here it is. Phil Chang, our watersheds are low with our existing growth. What solutions do you propose to sustain water demands for current and continued growth in Deschutes County?
Go. This year, we have seen brutal effects of a drought in our community. Farmers have been shut off, irrigation districts have stopped deliveries. Our river right now is green because Wickiup Reservoir is empty, and sediment, sediment that's been sitting on the bottom of Wickiup Reservoir for possibly decades is being picked up by the river flowing right through it and heading downstream. So we need to do everything we can to ensure that there is adequate water for farmers, for the river, and for growing communities. And the best place to look for that water is within agriculture. Some of our irrigation districts have a substantial allotment of, allocation of water. Some of them have much more modest allocations and more junior water rights. But we have the opportunity to save billions and billions of gallons of water in agriculture through things like canal piping, through things like on-farm efficiency, and to be able to share that water with other farmers, with the river, and with growing cities and growing communities. And that is, in my mind, our pathway to sustainability and future water supply reliability, is to use water more efficiently.
All right, thank you, Phil. Commissioner Henderson, our watersheds are low with our existing growth. What solutions do you propose to sustain water demands for current and continued growth in Deschutes County?
Thank you. So I have a little bit of a problem with the first sentence, our watersheds are low with our existing growth. What's really low this year is our reservoirs like Wickiup, which supply the water to the river system and then to irrigation. This was specifically low because of low snowpacks and in the mountains. Our watershed, which is the word used here, isn't necessarily low because that's groundwater. That's the water that is in the aquifer below all this, and that may be more affected by growth. But I don't think there's really a relationship between watersheds and growth, the way it's kind of implied here. But I do think there's the water issue serious. We called a drought early this year at the request of a couple of irrigation companies, because that gives them the chance to get more assistance from the state government. But it's an ongoing issue. Some years are more of a problem than others due to the snowpack, et cetera. But I'm not as convinced that growth has been the big. Can you put the question back up there a second? Sorry. Anyway, I think it was reducing demands. So I am very supportive of some of the things that are being done now by many different parties. I was on the Deschutes Basin Water Study, which went on. I joined as soon as I got on the commission, and I'm really supportive of a lot of the piping that they're doing in the irrigation canals. And I am also very supportive of the on-farm reductions that many of the farmers are able to do, going from flood irrigation to sprinkler irrigation, et cetera. But I think it is going to take a balancing effort. I still think one of the big solutions in our watershed, and this is a watershed, is additional storage. A reservoir somewhere else would be a great thing.
All right, thank you, Phil.
Could I?
Yes.
I don't necessarily have a rebuttal. I have a continuation of what I was saying before, what I should have used my 30 seconds for. But so I mentioned how important it is to conserve water, but I didn't talk about how and what the role of county commissioner is in doing that. The first thing that's really important for us to pursue conservation measures is to have everybody working together. And water, just like the forests that I've worked in for many years, are something that people fight about a lot. And we have accomplished a lot in this basin because people have collaborated enough for us to do that. And what's really important is that they need to collaborate enough that we can invite investment from the state and federal government into the basin to implement those water conservation projects, such as the $25 million that I was able to help bring to the Deschutes Basin when I was a congressional staffer some years back in order to do a large number of canal piping projects. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Phil. Chang, you get a minute, Phil.
I'll just add a little more. So if the issue of federal funding is an important one, I thought for several years that it was likely we'd have a large federal infrastructure package. Apparently it's deadlocked because neither side wants the other side to get credit for it, so they don't pass it. But I think that's still likely, and that would be a source going forward. I'd be happy to travel to Washington, meet with our congressional delegation to advocate for that. I did that with the road projects on the north end of Bend and was successful in helping bring back $60 million. But I think both with regard to the facilities, but also this idea of an additional reservoir is another one that federal funding would be really the answer if we ever got it. And that would help control the downstream irrigation and gives more capacity there so the upstream is less at risk. So thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I think we're doing so well. We've got time for one more question. How's that?
Thanks, sure.
You're popular candidates, and we can tell by the audience interaction with us today. This is the candidate forum for Deschutes County Commissioner. Phil Henderson, the incumbent, and Phil Chang as challenger. We've had some great questions. I want to thank you to all those who participated today. And thank you once again to Central Oregon Association of Realtors for sponsoring this and putting these the series of candidate forums on. I think we're ready for our fifth, and this will be the final question of the day, gentlemen. Phil Chang, how has county investment in community mental health kept up with increasing population growth? What can we do to better meet the need and support the county staff who are on the front line of supporting our community? A couple of questions combined there, I think.
Yeah, can go ahead and start. So as Phil Henderson mentioned, the Behavioral Health Division's budget last year was $33 million. Now that sounds like a lot of money, but what that hides is the fact that less than 10% of that total is county money, is county general fund going into the Behavioral Health Division. The majority is federal and state grants and reimbursements for Medicare, Medicaid, things like that, coverage. And so when you focus in on that county portion of the Behavioral Health Division's budget, what we see is an alarming downward trend. We have slashed investment in the Behavioral Health Division, general fund investment in the Behavioral Health Division by 14% over the last 2 years. And that means that as these, basically, essentially this commission has told the behavioral health staff, yeah, you can go out and do that work, but you take your tin cup and you find someone else to pay for it. Find those federal grants, ask the Central Oregon Health Council or the Sheriff's Office for money for the Stabilization Center, get somebody else to pay for it, and then maybe we'll consider allowing you to add the FTE that are needed. So that is not the way to run a priority service and a well-run service that meets the needs of lots and lots of people every year. Unfortunately, even though I think the behavioral health folks, staff are doing a great job, they do not have adequate resources to do things like bring down youth suicide rates, address substance abuse adequately, help our cops field public safety calls that involve someone having a mental health crisis.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Phil Henderson. How has county investment in community mental health kept up with increasing population growth? What can we do to better meet the need and support county staff who are on the front line of supporting our community?
Well, once again, I find it kind of amazing that Mr. Chang doesn't want to cut your taxes, and he thinks we should spend more money, even though we've got plenty of money and we're increasing every year. I've got a letter here from Janice Garceau, who's the head of the mental health department, and it relates to the stabilization center, which we've just opened, and Mr. Chang's been critical about all sorts of things we've done. I appreciate the way that you and Commissioner Adair dug in as new commissioners and took extra steps to understand this project and its goals. For me, that meant going to 6 other stabilization centers in the state to research them. She goes on, I'm also grateful for your advocacy on behalf of the Deschutes County Stabilization Center with St. Charles and hope someday that will come to fruition. You asked us some tough questions and pushed us on design. The results of our combined work are better as a result. For example, the peer respite room is a hit. That was something we suggested after our trips. So the way we support them is going into the programs they have, asking the tough questions about what are we spending the money on, how are we getting the most effectiveness, who's getting served, et cetera. And we have a great staff. We've had a great staff in the COVID pandemic, and we've had a great mental health staff. I find it kind of surprising that someone would say, well, I know you can get it from the federal or state government, but really you should tax local county people because that would be somehow better. We have had a remarkable track record with state and federal government. They also are supported by all taxpayers. But we actually become a pilot or become a leader in so many parts of mental health that we've had that funding. The fact is, the years we cut our general fund contribution, we had so much more money starting the year, we didn't need it. So that's another little part of this you'd learn being a commissioner.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah,
1
I'd like-
minute to Phil, if you want to just wait until we get the clock up here, Phil. And you have 1 minute for final rebuttal here.
It is absolutely true that our county behavioral health staff are doing an amazing job, and they're creating programs that other people want to copy and learn from. The fact remains that the county in the last 2 years has slashed general fund investment in those services by 14%, at the same time that our population has grown by 5%. And when you change the ratio like that, you make it like you got to do all this with federal and state money that has regulations and constraints and administrative requirements and reporting and all these things. You are stymieing your staff's ability to do their work. And what we need is a behavioral health staff who can see kids who need mental health counseling. The wait times for kids, for families, for mental health counseling, through the county are really long.
All right, thank you very much, Phil. Hate to have to cut you off. 1 minute for Phil Henderson.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where Mr. Chang's getting that information, but the fact is our county health staff is very prompt at getting to people. We measure that. They offer a lot of services for all people on the Oregon Health Plan or can reach our mental health services. So you're talking about things, I've been there 4 years, the complaints you're making about what's wrong with federal funding are not things that we've discussed as being any kind of barrier to us using those funds. And I'm in favor of continuing to use those funds until such time as they run out. And I don't think that we need to just come up with money. And I don't agree with the word slashing funds because, as I said, we started those years with so much more in the bank from other things we'd gotten that we didn't need them to meet the requests of the county health department.
All
Thank
right.
you.
That's all the time we have today for the questions. I want to thank our audience out there watching today on Facebook Live and sending in their questions. Pardon me. That's the first time I can remember in these forums that I've done that we've had more questions from the audience than we've had that have been submitted previously. So I want to thank all of you for joining in today, and I hope you enjoyed the forum, and I hope you've appreciated the answers. And I want to thank the candidates, Commissioner Phil Henderson on my far right, his challenger, Phil Chang, next to me here. Great job, gentlemen. Thank you very much for that. And we want to thank our producer, Tyler. Tyler works tirelessly on these things, and we want to thank the Central Oregon Association of Realtors and our director and his crew, Kevin Reichel. A terrific job, gentlemen. Thank you very much. My name is Lee Anderson. I am an anchorman at News Channel 21, and we will have continued coverage of this fall's election, Decision 2020, on News Channel 21, so I hope you'll tune in for that. And there's going to be more candidate forums coming up throughout the fall. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.